You're listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Hey all, this is Michael with Arcane Carolinas. Welcome back to Arcane Carolinas Case Files. If you are a new listener, then you might not have heard one of these yet. These are an opportunity for us to chat with folks from around the Carolinas who are paranormal investigators, or they have some cool thing that they make that we think intersects with the sorts of topics that we like to cover, or they are historians, or they're experts in ghost stories, stuff that we're pretty sure y'all would enjoy hearing, and we definitely enjoy hearing. And so we like to talk to these folks and then share that with you. We do an episode of Arcane Carolinas Case Files every now and then, and it's always a real pleasure to get to talk to these folks. In this episode of Arcane Carolinas Case Files, we're going to be talking to a game company out of South Carolina called Vindicated Entertainment. They make really fascinating tabletop games and card games, beautiful art, and really fun topics. And it was a really great conversation to get to talk to them about storytelling through games and having games that can be enjoyed by the whole family, but also are about the sorts of topics that we enjoy and the artwork behind them and the sorts of environments where you can find these folks. It's a really fun one. And then we get to talk to SpookyCLT. They are an investigative team and sort of historians out of Charlotte, North Carolina, where they focus on the spooky side of Charlotte and some of the obscure history of Charlotte. It's so much fun getting to talk to both of these folks and really enjoy what they're doing. We'll have links to all of their websites and their Instagram accounts and everything like that in the show notes. And if there's anybody else from around the Carolinas that you know of that you think we would enjoy talking to, feel free to let us know. Drop us a line at arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. And there's also always a link to that in the show notes as well. Thanks for listening. We've really enjoyed chatting with them, and we're really excited to get to share it with you.
Hello and welcome back to Arcane Carolinas Case Files. It has been a minute since we've done one of these, and I am really excited. I am your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I'm your co-host, award-winning novelist Michael G. Williams.
Our guest today is Vincent from Vindicated Entertainment.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to discuss gaming and the Arcane.
Vindicated Entertainment is, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, a game publishing company, and you've published several games. You have board games, RPGs, card games. Am I missing anything?
That's the main focus. Like that's the bread and butter of Vindicated Entertainment. We also do Twitch streams. We do YouTube content. I've written some articles, things like that. So I've dabbled in a lot of media related stuff when it comes to, videos and, writing. But the main thing, the biggest thing that we're known for and, the staple is making these games. And one reason why I reached out to you guys about this is because our last card game that we published is called GHOULLOTINE. And it's a game that my fiance and I went together on. It's the only game that was made entirely by her and I, just us two. She did all the artwork for it. And then I did all the game design and the setup. And she did some of the logistical stuff because she's good at, keeping up with kind of like the mundane task sort of things where that kind of stuff really can get tedious to work with. So she's good at like that stuff plus the artwork, and then I'm good at like everything else. So is a great project for her and I to work on together. And so now we have a game that's fun to play, but also is beautifully illustrated because she's one of the most talented artists I've ever met.
And kind of spooky too, right? It's got like a spooky
Yeah. I think I forgot to throw that in there. So it's a spooky card game. It's illustrated with tons of different monsters. So you'll see your skeletons, your boogeyman, your spiders, your vampires, witches, mummies, spirits, ghosts, werewolves, scarecrows, like a lot of the monsters that you could think of whenever you think of like, okay, like if there's going to be a monster in this card game, what will be in there? There are a few surprises though. We do have a Wendigo in there among some other surprises.
Yeah, I see a chupacabra, a pumpkin head. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now on the website.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it also has what I call like a family-friendly art style. It's not illustrated to be graphically horrific or something. And that just comes from our love. I mean, we just love that kind of style. And there's not a lot of that out there. There's a ton of games that have very gross, artwork and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, we were like, okay, let's try to make this fun for all ages. Now, granted, I have encountered some people that laugh at the idea of like a game about monsters that's for all ages. Like I had a woman tell me that's contradictory. Like she really didn't like.
Not.
Yeah, it's really not.
Yeah, no, she was not having it though. She was so upset by hearing that, and it threw me off. I never even considered that as like a thing that some people might think, but some people just inherently associate monsters, I guess, with like, I don't know, things that are not suitable for children, no matter what.
Right.
So yeah,
well, the real Ghostbusters animated series from the 80s would like a word, as well as the Addams Family, as well as the Munsters, as well as
there's so much. If you're a fan of those things, then this is very much like, oh, well, there's some shows and movies you can watch with your family that is inspired by Halloween and that kind of monsters and just that sort of genre. Like, here's a card game you can play.
Oh, man. I don't know if y'all remember this. Real Monsters on Nickelodeon.
No.
Vaguely.
Vaguely.
I don't remember like what it looks like, but I definitely like recognize that name.
It's like three monsters were friends in like monster school and just their adventures. Anyway, that lady is wrong and she should feel bad because I can give you decades of properties that are family friendly and accessible monster and spooky themed toys and games and all that. So good on you. I'm looking at it right now. It's awesome. It's on VindicatedEntertainment.com. Can you buy this now?
Yeah, it's available.
You have a really active community as well. Like your Discord server is very active, and you mentioned you do the videos. It's really cool stuff.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So being from South Carolina, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to spotlight this local business. It aligns with our interests. There's a big cross section. Michael's a gamer. He's more of a gamer than I am because he actually has friends to play with.
That's like one of the banes of being like a board gamer. It's like I love board games and they're so much fun, but you definitely have to have a group to play with.
Right. It's tough.
It is. I wrote for a game for White Wolf for one edition of it. So I guess actually at the time they had a different Onyx Path Publishing. I wrote background and setting for their 20th anniversary edition of Wraith the Oblivion. So I love gaming and I love game stuff. I don't at all understand game design. That's not a thing that I'm good at. I can't even remember what to roll, and I've been playing D&D with the same people for 25 years. But I really enjoy the storytelling aspects of gaming, the way that storytelling is incorporated into a game. I like the way that a good game creates opportunities for a story to get told. That doesn't always necessarily have to be a tabletop RPG, though. Anyway, that's a long way of saying I really like games.
Hey, that's awesome. And I appreciate that you guys care about highlighting things in the Carolinas, because I feel like the Carolinas aren't known for being robust with opportunity when it comes to any sort of, I don't know, nerd culture or anything, adjacent to this. So being able to have some platforms and get an audience specifically because I'm from South Carolina, or the Carolinas, is pretty nice. And so I appreciate that.
Do you ever get a table at like local conventions or anything like that? Where can people find you in addition to your website?
Yeah, so in addition to our website, where, as you mentioned, we do have a big Discord community. We have a Twitch community, YouTube. Aside from that, though, we do go to a lot of local events. Of course, last year, we did not.
Right.
But as things are kind of, kicking back, we're able to start booking a lot of events. I think we have 7 shows currently booked, or events, for the remainder of this year alone. We go to this thing called the Southeast Punk Flea Market. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. So at first I didn't know if this would align directly with us, because it's a lot more geared towards actually a lot more of the Arcane stuff. It's a lot of all kinds of things. Like you could see like tarot cards there. You could see like bone jewelry. You can see punk leather jackets, jean jackets and stuff. Board gaming isn't like a direct fit there, but we're also the only people that has that. And so there tends to be a lot of crossover. I mean, if you're into like anything sort of like alternative, you're probably more open to giving like a game about fantasy a try. So I think we still fit with them very well. So we still do those shows. I think we have 4 of those this year. They have one in Athens, Georgia. They have one that we're doing in Greenville, South Carolina, and one in Spartanburg, South Carolina. We also have the Southeast Game Exchange, which is our next event. That's going to be July 10th and July 11th. That is a video game centered convention, but what's cool about that one is they also have a lot of room for tournaments. So they're going to be doing like a Halo 1 tournament, a Super Smash Brothers tournament, but they're also allowing us to run tournaments for our card card games as well. So we're going to be giving out prizes. We're going to have free entry. We're going to be just giving out stuff, having a blast. That's our preference, is being able to go to cons or events where we can not only run our table, but we can also run events there and make sure everyone has a fun time playing, and we can give out promo cards and things like that just to make sure that people have a good time. I'm trying to think of what other ones we have down the road. I know that Richard's Comics and Collectibles, they're going to be doing a sort of Comic-Con this year in Greenville. I think they said that's going to be in November, so we're going to be doing that one. We did SC Comic-Con earlier this year, and we already booked it for next year, so we'll be back. We tend to do Nashicon, which is in Columbia. I'm trying to think of what else. We've done some in North Carolina before too.
It looks like you have a tab at vindicatedentertainment.com for events. So if people want to get the list, it looks like you got a lot of good stuff on there.
Actually just added that yesterday.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, because we had someone talk to me and they said, hey, if I go to your website, I can see all this information for which events you have coming up, right? I'm like, actually, no, I don't know why that's not on there. I probably need to change that. So let's go add that.
I understand that.
I get you pointing out that like one might not expect something like the Southeast Punk Flea Market to attract a lot of gamers. But my experience, if my experience has been representative at all, is that a lot of like the punk scene overlaps with the board game and tabletop RPG scene, and that there's a lot more in common there than one might imagine.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really fun that way. Like some of the worst events that we do are the ones that are focused on board gaming. Like it, sure. I think, I don't exactly know why. I guess maybe there's just more prominent board game titles. There's kind of more flashier games sometimes, like with bigger components and bigger pieces. And there's just sort of a certain style. Like our games are a little bit more casual focused at the moment. A lot of our games are more centered around people that like board gaming, but like you can play it as a person that's not super invested in board games. Mm-hmm. And so we have a really easy time showing our games off to people that don't normally play a ton of board games. And then when you get people that play like nothing but board games, they have hundreds of games in their collection, they can be a bit pickier and want something that's a little bit more like a 4-hour experience for their board game as opposed to half an hour and things like that.
Mm-hmm. See, I think that's great though, because that's pretty much what, well, last year killed my game group. Unfortunately, when you couldn't get together, you couldn't play. And trying to introduce to family members and people that I was able to see gaming, it's like they're not going to go for this 6-hour experience. So I think there's a definite space there for that type of gaming, and I think that's awesome.
I appreciate that. I definitely agree. Like you need something to grow the industry. If you're a fan of board games, you need something, or you need to still encourage, or at least not try to dismiss games that are great at bringing new people into your hobby and like what you love, so it can be expanded more. So like we actually do really well at anime conventions. Like a lot of times at anime conventions, we have people that will see all the cool anime art and see all the anime stuff they like, but then they walk around and they're like, there's nothing else to do. Well, I'm like, hey, we have board game events happening. Would you like to join in? They like the artwork, so they jump in, they start playing it, and then they love it, so then they start purchasing the game. So it's a win-win on our part, but it's also good for them because they discover that they actually like board games more than they thought, and then they start growing the industry. Now they're more open, and then they'll purchase more games down the road from other publishers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to put you in the hot seat now. All right.
Okay.
Brace yourself.
All right, I'm braced.
All right. What is your favorite spooky story based in South Carolina? Your favorite local legend, or like haunted road or haunted house or monster or whatever?
Okay, so that is a bit of the hot seat because I'm a bit new when it comes to, like, I'm not new when it comes to monsters and stuff, of course. I'm kind of new to the idea of exploring my like local legends or myths that's happening in my area. I know that there's this spot that I would hear about all the time when I was a kid and teenager, like going to elementary school, and people were talking about Crybaby Bridge. I'm not sure if you guys heard of that one. Yeah. So I don't know much about it, but I know people would say that they were spooked out, and then that they would take their friends there. Like, weird things would be happening over there.
Yeah, that's great. That's a classic.
Yeah. So I can speak though. I can share one of my personal like ghost stories if you guys would be open to that.
Sure.
Totally.
Okay. Cool. So when I was in high school, I was walking through my house, and when I say my house, I mean my parents' house that I was living in at the time. Well, there's two mostly. So when I was a little kid, I was sleeping in the floor. My sister and I would always make like little pallets and we'd always like quote unquote camp out in the living room and like watch cartoons and then just fall asleep in the living room. Sure. And one night I woke up and I swear I saw like this ghost who was like this girl who was like wearing a dress. She was just staring at me and she was standing in front of the fireplace. And I was so scared that I just closed my eyes and I was like, Vincent, just don't look at her. Just don't pay her any attention. It'll be okay. She'll go away. And I refused to open my eyes again. But then I felt like her presence was right next to my face, like a little bit after that. And I just refused to open my eyes. And I just stayed like that. And then the next day when I woke up, I heard my sister walk up to my dad and she's like, Dad, last night, like I was so scared. I woke up and I saw this girl. She was standing there with long hair and had this dress. And she described the same ghost that I had saw. But I never told her anything because we had just woken up this morning. I didn't even think to tell her anything because it was right as we woke up. And so that was kind of freaky because I know I didn't say anything to her, but yet she just described exactly what I saw to my dad. So to carry that forward, when I was in high school, many years later, I was walking back and forth from my room to the bathroom, which the living room was in between. And one time when I was walking through there, I turn and look and I see this giant, well, I won't say giant, but like in the corner, there's a chair. And I knew that my mom had folded laundry. And so the way that the laundry is folded, it looked sort of like an old woman was sitting there in the shadows because all the lights were off. So you couldn't really see anything. And I was like, well, that's really creepy looking to see this laundry folded in a certain way where it just looks like this old hag just sitting there staring at me. And it was kind of creeping me out. But I said, you know what? I can just walk up to it, clearly see that it's just T-shirts and, you know, whatever else. And it's not actually a person. So it'll be fine. So then I walk up and then just, I don't know if like, you know, my eyes are playing tricks on me or what, but like, I just still look like an old woman no matter how close I walked up to this thing. So I got freaked out. I went back to my room. I just shut and locked my door. Like, I'm not messing with this today. But what makes this crazier was that weekend, my best friend came over and my best friend and I were talking about different ideas. You know, we started a clothing line together at the time called Dead Ahead Apparel, which is really cool, but I digress. We were trying to come up with a name for it. And then he was like, hey, I got to use the restroom real quick, think about it, and then see whatever. So he left and then he took a long time. And I was like, and like I'm pretty sure he said that he just had to pee. And I'm like, this guy, maybe he was just lying because this guy's taking way longer. Well, he comes back and he looks stunned. Like his eyes are wide open. He's like not saying much. I'm like, dude, what's the matter? And then he just looks at me and he's like, I was in the bathroom. I was looking at the mirror and I just saw this old woman behind me. And then he started describing what she looked like and stuff. And I was like, dude, like that's the same woman that I saw a few days ago. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, and I explained that whole story to him. And like, that was a real creepy coincidence there. But that's pretty much my only ghost stories I've had. But those were two incidences that I had that were pretty creepy.
That is wild. One.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing too.
You're very welcome.
Cool. All right.
I've done a lot.
Well, thanks for coming on. This has been Vincent with Vindicated Entertainment, based out of South Carolina, making spooky games and sharing stories.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. I love talking about games, love talking about spooky stories, so it's perfect to be here.
Welcome to another Arcane Carolinas Case Files episode. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I'm your co-host, award-winning novelist Michael G. Williams.
And our guest today is Jason from SpookyCLT.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We connected via Instagram. I had followed your page for a while, account, page, whatever you want to call it. And you followed us back. And I was in Charlotte looking at something. And you were like, hey, check out this other cool stuff. And I was like, wow, these people are awesome.
That's the ideal experience for my account. It's what I'm trying to get people to do. So I'm happy to hear that. That's how it went.
It was fantastic. I was there with my wife.
What did you do on your trip?
So we went to go to the Sleepy Poet Antique Mall and look at some stuff. What we wound up doing was eating a bunch of really good food, drinking a bunch of really good drinks, going to Sleepy Poet. We're going to talk about one of the places we went because you were the one that told me to check it out. And that was Devil's Logic Brewery.
Yeah.
And then we also went to the Dunhill Hotel and kicked around there for an evening.
Did you like it?
Yeah, it was really cool. We're going to do a full episode on it. I had a really, really good experience there talking to staff. They were super open, did some exploring and walking around. And I don't want to get too into it because we are going to do an episode on the history of that hotel. But I wouldn't have gone there.
There's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have gone there if you hadn't suggested it, and it was just like peeling back layers once I was there, man. And
it's their staff's really open to talking about like their personal paranormal experiences. We actually did a live podcast recording with a local group called the Hex Files. They do their own podcast, and we did like a live podcast recording talking about like they investigated. My wife and I, we kind of did an investigation, but not really. We were just staying there after our wedding, so no ghost experiences, unfortunately. But they did give us like the backdoor tour, showing us around all the spots, and I guess we can get into the history a little bit later or whenever you want. I just don't want to spoil your episode.
We'll focus on Devil's Logic for this
one. Okay. I'll have to tell you off air then.
So you do investigations. You check out spooky spots and get into the history of it.
Yeah. So investigations aren't really like the number one thing we do, but since a lot of the places that we talk about are local restaurants or eateries, we do our best to, take pictures ourselves while we're there. Talk to staff to get like real life stories, but you probably won't catch us in like an abandoned asylum or anything like anytime soon.
Nothing wrong. That's a young person's game.
Speak for yourself. I haven't gone to any abandoned asylums, but if somebody said, "Hey, there's an abandoned asylum right there. Should we stop and take a look around?" I would absolutely say yes.
I think it's like something you have to build up to first. Like if I had my own Discovery show, that's a different story.
Right.
See, I remember doing all that before it was even a genre on reality TV, and like not breaking into, that implies a crime. This is all on the record. Exploring abandoned psychiatric facilities and old hospitals and stuff. And we need to do an episode on some of those experiences. I don't know. That was a lot of fun, but I've been chased enough times by private security and licensed law enforcement to not want to do that anymore.
Yeah, I'm even at the point where on my Instagram account, I don't even talk about like private residences. I don't want anyone saying like, "Oh, we saw this post on SpookyCLT and that's why we're breaking and entering."
Yeah.
There's actually a unique story for my account. Is when I first started everything, the reason for the account is to chronicle ghost stories and spooky aspects of Charlotte, North Carolina. And one of the first things I talked about was like a Reddit post that I found about a satanic church, and I'm using air quotes, off of Margaret Wallace Road here in Charlotte.
Okay.
And I posted it probably once every 4 or 5 months because it always gets like a huge reaction. People love the story. And the last time I did it around 6 months ago, we had someone claiming that it was their grandmother's house reach out and be like, "Hey, just letting you know, this story is based around my grandmother's house. My cousin started it in the 80s. I know you're not doing anything harmful here, but because of this story, my grandmother was harassed the last 30 years of her life, like in this house." But ever since then, I don't post that story anymore, and I try not to do houses.
Yeah,
but it's crazy. People reached out to the account being like, "Oh, I know exactly what satanic church you're talking about. I have this personal experience where I saw, this huge paranormal experience," and it turns out that they were just talking to someone who would listen to them.
Yeah, we do a lot of reminding people that oftentimes what we're talking about are places that are technically private property, or way more than technically. They just like are somebody's yard.
Yeah.
And the best way to get to keep enjoying the story is to not bother those people.
Yeah, don't be the guy who ruins it.
Right. Yeah. You document all these stories. You have a website. You also have an Instagram account.
Yeah. Instagram's definitely been the focus, at least for the SpookyCLT side of what we're doing.
Now, do you have any interest in people sending you leads or stories or history or anything?
100%. Yeah. I started this account about 3 years ago. And the reason I did it is because I've lived in Charlotte for about 5 years now. And when we first get here, you kind of go through this exploring phase when you're talking to a lot of people, you're doing all the Charlotte stuff. And one thing that I was hearing at my job and just out at breweries and stuff is that Charlotte has no culture. Charlotte has no history. I bought into it at first and I was like, yeah, they're getting rid of all these old buildings. Everyone here is in transplant, including myself. It's hard to, on a surface level, it does look like everything is 10 years old or less.
This ghost is brought to you by Bank of America.
Right? And then I've just always been that type of person where if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So I was trying to figure out what's the best way for me to get everyone on board with Charlotte having history and culture. And my wife and I were just like huge spooky people. That's definitely one of the things that like we really flowed with together when we first started dating. And it just turns into the ghost account. We went on one of those ghost tours to Charlotte. We were like, oh, there's a few stories here. Posted them on Instagram. And then next thing you know, we're reading books and doing research. And 3 years later, and I still feel feel like there's so much that we haven't even covered, and we keep learning stuff every day. So yeah, long story short, yes, have people send me their fun facts, their history, and their own experiences. That would be awesome.
And we will have links to your stuff in the show notes for this episode.
Yeah.
We're pretty simple. We have the one website, and then we have just 2 different Instagram accounts to follow. The website being SpookyCLT.com.
Cool. My favorite Charlotte contemporary scary story would be, and the overdraft fee hit twice. Bank of America. So for people that are listening that have never been to Charlotte, Bank of America has offices there. That's why I'm making that joke. It just occurred to me that people might be like, why is he being such a jerk about Bank of America?
So even the fact that like Charlotte is known as a banking city, that's nothing new. You guys may know because you're so into North Carolina, but the first gold rush of the country was in Charlotte. So there's actually gold mines underneath where uptown Charlotte is, and where you went in the Sleepy Potent area called South End was actually known as the Gold District. And it's because of those gold mines. So at one point there was like 70 different active accounts. You couldn't get like more than 5 miles from without hitting something. But they still, when they were doing construction for Bank of America Stadium, they did find abandoned gold mines while they were doing constructions.
Very cool. I don't live anywhere near Charlotte, but I did know that North Carolina was big on that. Down the road from me, there's actually Gold Mine Road.
Nice.
The first time I saw it, I was like, well, I'm driving down that. And it's like a little dirt road. But apparently there was a mine there.
Yeah, Reed Gold Mine, which is no longer within city limits, but I still own it as a Charlotte ghost story. Reed Gold Mine is known for being actually a haunted gold mine, and it's because they found like the first nugget of gold there, which sparked everything, at least on the East Coast. So you can talk about anything with Charlotte, and I'll find a way to turn it back into something historic and spooky.
No, I love it. That approach, we're all about that approach. We really enjoy the history behind the stories. So one of the places you recommended I check out was a place called Devil's Logic Brewery, and I went there for lunch during my long weekend in Charlotte one day. And I have to say that the food was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I got BLT sliders, which doesn't sound phenomenal. You're like, how good can that possibly be? It's tiny BLTs. It's good enough that I'm talking about it. You know,
they're not sponsoring anything, right?
Right. No. And we've made that clear. Every time we talk about local businesses, we make it clear that we get no kickbacks, whatever. If anything, we're giving them our money when we talk about them because of a positive experience. And the beer was good too, which was cool. My wife got a flight. I just got a pint and then finished half her flight because that's the way that works. And yeah, I would say that the weirdest thing that happened to me while I was there, I didn't really have any paranormal experiences other than that the motion sensors in the bathroom didn't work for the sink. And I was like, oh no, which is in its own way a horror story. The water won't work. First I was like, the soap doesn't work. That's okay. The water will. The water doesn't work. Give me a paper towel. Give me a paper towel to grab the handle. That doesn't work either. So I wound up having to use hand sanitizer, which was fine. But the point is, I had a lovely time, and I know you did an investigation there, and I'd really like to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Devil's Logic's not an old brewery. They opened up during the pandemic pretty early on. They actually this past weekend had their grand opening because they never got to celebrate their grand opening. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So it started when my wife and I went just like to grab a drink. The place is called Devil's Logic. So we're not going to talk about it.
Right.
It looks like the posts that were there for SpookyCLT. We posted it on Instagram. A few days later, they reached out to us. They sent us a DM saying like, hey, October is right around the corner. We're looking for something spooky to do. You guys seem to be the people to talk to. Come in, have a drink with us, and we'll chat. We did. And long story short, my wife was talking to like another woman, like their Instagram or their social media person. And both of them said they had shared weird experiences. And guess where? The bathroom. So it's funny that you said that. Yeah.
No way.
So that sparked the whole thing. We were like, wait a second, like, do you know anything about what was here before you guys came in? And the answer is American Billiards. You don't go there to buy
right.
tables. Long story short, though, is that what they built Devil's Logic out of was reclaimed wood from American Billiards. And what American Billiards made their shop out of was reclaimed wood from the structure that was there beforehand, before a fire was there. So when you were in Devil's Logic, when you were like in that main level where the downstairs bar is, if you look up, you can see scorched wood in the rafters.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was from a fire. So they're using the same materials from a building that burnt down in their spot. And when they were putting together Devil's Logic, they found just mounds of questionable black dirt, which is now where the restrooms are, underneath there.
Ooh.
People have had weird experiences. And when I first made a post about something's going on in Devil's Logic, we haven't investigated it yet, send us your stories. Someone said, yeah, like I felt uncomfortable in the woman's bathroom. I felt like someone was watching me, even though I knew I was alone. I'm not saying your experiences with paranormal, but it is funny.
No, it is now. No, don't take that from me. No, there you go.
Your comment. They're like, oh, you like ghost stories? We'll give
Like,
something to talk about.
let's give this wise something. We'll make him.
So it started with that, and then from there I just started looking for possible angles for this place, and I reached out to like a local Instagram witch, and he was like, I don't know anything about this place, but right off the bat I looked at their Instagram and they had just posted a picture of them putting a mural up, and the guy who put the mural up put all these symbols underneath where he painted, and the witch was like, yeah, that's like a beacon to the dead. This is the symbol of the Greek god who walked people to the dead. This eye is like an amplifier. So he pretty much painted over all of these symbols that are strengthening possible connection to the other side. And this happened within, 3 days of us talking to them. So it was all kind of like building up. And then a few months later, it was my wife and I, and then, our friends who do the Hex Files podcast, Josh and Tamara, and they brought their Ouija board, they bought the spirit box, the pendulum thing, they did some witchy stuff too. And we went on a Monday when they were all closed. We went around, it was 8 or 9 o'clock, so it was pretty late. And we just did a walkthrough, and then where they felt there's the most spiritual activity, which is in this overlooking room of where their brewery, like their brew house is upstairs. It may have been closed off when you went, but nothing crazy happened. But on the spirit box, all 3 of them did it, including my wife, and they all had different Christian undertones, things that they were hearing on the spirit box. Like they were hearing like pastors talking and like, Catholic hymn music,
So it's a freaky place to get a beer.
It's a freaky place to get a beer. Yeah. We're still looking into it. I don't think the story is anywhere near done, but we have all of the tools of a good ghost story.
It is on my revisit list now. I'm okay, done. Next time I'm in Charlotte, I'm going back.
Generally speaking, I'm in Charlotte once a year. I used to be there all the time because my husband lived there when we met. But the next time I'm in Charlotte, which will be next year, I will definitely be going to this place to check it out. I would love to check out those symbols myself.
So you can't see the symbols though, because they painted over them. But if you were to go on Devil's Logic Brewery, their Instagram, you can go back to see them creating the space. So they were showing a lot of pictures of everything in the process of being built.
Good deal. Thank you.
Maybe,
I can send them to you because I've sent them to plenty of people at this point.
I would love that.
Absolutely.
Maybe next year when we're in Charlotte for Con Carolinas, we can do something.
That would be pretty great.
And hook it up. Be awesome. Wow.
I'm not going anywhere.
I'm excited now. I'm like fast forward in a year. I'm like, this is going to be great, you guys.
So I have one more thing about Devil's Logic to share with you. And I just listened to your Devil's Tramping Ground episode. Mm-hmm. And we actually did, or on our podcast, the Old North State podcast, we just did a Devil's Tramping Ground episode too, because you have to.
Yeah.
If you're talking about North Carolina, you can't not do it. And it was funny, at one point when I was talking, and I had not listened to your podcast yet, we did the same thing where we're listing all of the other like devils in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And word for word, and I was like, and my personal favorite, the Devil's Skater Patch, which is exactly what you did. But then I caught myself and changed it to my favorite North Carolina devil place. It's actually Devil's Logic now. But are you guys on TikTok at all?
No, you're the second person to ask us that in as many weeks.
And the reason I do is because Devil's Logic is on TikTok.
Okay.
And they did this whole thing about they wanted to be the first brewery to send a beer to space. Ooh. So they like made this rig with GoPros. They welded their beer to the thing and it was attached to a weather balloon. And they did it. You can see the video of their beer with the Earth's curve in the background. Oh. I don't think atmospherically speaking it was technically space, but it was definitely like
that's cool
up there. But the craziest part is that they did this a few times, but the time they successfully made it to space, the weather balloon popped and it came back down to Earth. It came back down to North Carolina. And guess where in the state it dropped?
No way.
Yeah, Devil's Tramping Ground. So Devil's Logic Brewery successfully sent a beer to space. It got rejected and was sent right back down to the Devil's Tramping Ground.
So cool.
Right?
Well, that is a great story. Thank you so much for coming on. SpookyCLT on Instagram. They have a website. We'll have all the links in the show notes. If you're looking for anything relating to weird stories out of Charlotte, these are your people. They did not steer me wrong on my visit to Charlotte. recently, and we'll get into that on a separate episode. But thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. That was really fun.
Yeah, no problem. Next time you're in Charlotte, let me know. I'll think of a few more places for you to visit.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at www.michaelgwilliamsbooks.com and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.